Welcome to the Northcliffe Heritage Project. I'm very sorry that virus regulations mean that I can't give this presentation in person. Each slide has an audio commentary attached to it. If you show the presentation as a PowerPoint slideshow, pressing down once will take you to the next slide. Pressing down a second time will give you the audio commentary. Pressing a third time will take you to the next slide. This slide shows how the rest of the presentation will be organized. I'm going to assume that no one knows anything about the Northcliffe Heritage Project, although I appreciate in reality this is probably not true. I'll begin by explaining where Northcliffe Woods and Northcliffe Park are, and I'll introduce the project. To make sense of what follows, a good deal of geological knowledge will be necessary, and I'll explain this. I'll detail the various types of evidence the project used, including maps, aerial photography, and LiDAR scans. Finally, there will be a slide dealing with our conclusions, and a slide with thanks and acknowledgements to the many people who helped us. The presentation will be interrupted by a number of slides showing in red the topic we have reached. This presentation contains a number of maps, LiDAR scans and aerial photographs. To help you orientate yourselves, I've identified two fixed points called 1 and 2. 1 is the path which we call the S-shaped path, which leads off the grassed area you reach fairly quickly after entering the wood at the Cliffwood Avenue car park entrance. This slide shows an aerial photograph of Northcliffe Woods and Park. Point 1 is marked again. Point 2 represents an inverted C shape formed by High Bank Lane. On the photograph itself, you can see the relationship of Northcliffe to Bradford Road, the main road leading from Bradford to Shipley. Working from the north downwards, you can see Old Spring Woods, Northcliffe Park, Northcliffe Woods itself, and then the modern golf course. You can see points 1 and 2 labelled on the first Ordnance Survey map that shows Northcliffe Wood. This was published in 1852, but the surveying was almost certainly done during the late 1840s. Most places have their modern names, and you can see the wood, the dyke, Northcliffe Colliery, and a largely forgotten sandstone quarry just south of the wood. In the late 19th and early 20th centuries, Northcliffe, along with most of Shipley and Heaton, belonged to the Ross estate. The Rosses moved back to Ireland in 1911, and this led to the purchase of Northcliffe by Sir Norman Ray, and his presentation of it to the people of Shipley. Several of Bradford's woodlands have had historical and archaeological surveys undertaken. I believe that Judy Woods was the very first, and Buckwoods near Thackley was being surveyed at about the same time as Northcliffe. Interest in a project to study the history and archaeology of Northcliffe began in 2015. It has taken nearly 5 years to perform the study and write up the results, but a final report should be available towards the end of the year. I'm very grateful to the Friends of Northcliffe and all the volunteers involved, but I've given 4 names of people who were especially hard-working during the project. This slide shows a number of our volunteers at work. I hope they all look reasonably happy. The geology of Northcliffe closely resembles that of the rest of Bradford. Understanding it will explain why the area was of such great interest to extraction industries in the past, and why it was the centre of coal mining, brick making and fireclay extraction. This is a picture of Bolton Woods Quarry, but in fact if you dig a hole anywhere in Bradford you'll see a very similar appearance of layers of sandstone, mudstone and coal seams. In total, the rocks form the lower coal measures. The horizontal red line in this slide shows an approximate surface level of Northcliffe in a diagram of the lower coal measures. If you dug a hole in Northcliffe, you might find the 36-yard coal, hardbed coal and the softbed coal. The Ellen Flag sandstone is found on higher ground like Heaton Hill and Eccles Hill, but is not available in Northcliffe. The better bed coal and black bed coal are the two important seams on which the iron industry of South Bradford is founded. I have to admit that a modern geology map is really quite confusing for the non-expert. The area of Heaton Woods and Northcliffe Woods is enclosed in the red box. SR stands for Stanningly Rock, which was exploited in this area. 36Y is the 36-yard coal seam, HB is hardbed and SB is the softbed. All these seams once outcropped locally, but you'll see no sign of them today. 48YR is the 48-yard rock, which forms part of Baildon Moor. EF is Ellen Flags. The hatched areas represent glacial deposition and landslips. The broken lines represent geological faults, and as you can see, this area is intensely faulted. In some respects, this simpler map, based on the first OS map, is easier to understand. Alison Timon, who kindly advised on the geology of Northcliffe, has annotated it for us. This map is available from the Coal Authority interactive site. The purple lines represent outcrops of coal seams, although these would not be visible now. Each X represents the position of a known coal shaft. The positions are probably not terribly accurate, but I would like to stress the overall impression, which is that the area around Northcliffe has been very extensively exploited for coal in the past. The coal measures contain a number of useful minerals which were widely exploited during the Victorian period. The different types of coal mine would have been explained in detail had I been able to talk to you personally. But probably bell pits and pillar and stall mining are represented in Northcliffe, along with drifts, which are horizontal passages dug into a hillside to access a mineral seam. All mines needed to be ventilated and drained of water. I'd now like to explain the various types of information we used when we were pursuing the project. Oral information is available back as far as the Second World War. There is also photographic information both before and after the Second War. I'm particularly grateful to Veronica Youngson for this photograph, which seems to show work being undertaken on the dike in the 1970s. The death of Tony Woods, our historian, in 2019 was a huge loss to the project. I can't stress too highly how much his insights and hard work contributed. This is the first map of Northcliffe which he found. Please notice that the field to the extreme left is known as Coal Pit Close, so it seems quite clear that coal extraction was being undertaken prior to 1774. This is the first Ordnance Survey map of the area again. On this occasion, Tony has taken information from the tithe reports to add field numbers and to indicate the type of farming use to which the fields were being put. The Bradford Library Service has a number of maps of Northcliffe and adjacent parts of Shipley. This map from 1837 was used extensively in the project. It almost certainly won't show to best advantage on your computer screens. This map shows Joseph Wright's soft-bed colliery. There are two shafts, one very close to the S-shaped path, and a system of galleries that extend south of Northcliffe Woods almost as far as Heaton Royds Lane. This map shows the galleries of Joseph Cliffe's fireclay mine, overdrawn on a map of the area. A man called Joseph Wright had an open tail or drift mine exploiting the hard bed coal seam. This sketch map shows quite how far his galleries extended. As you can see, they virtually reach Heaton Shea. This is a slide that Tony Woods prepared for a poster on the project. It shows the extent of the last two coal mines superimposed on a modern aerial photograph. It also contains the names of a number of other mining features we discovered during the project. This slide shows essentially the same features superimposed on a map of the area. This is a modern aerial photograph taken from the application called Google Earth. It shows the area once known as Coal Pit Close at the end of Northcliffe Park. The yellow splodges in the fields are creeping buttercup, which often seems to grow well in disturbed ground. This aerial photograph was taken about 70 years ago in monochrome. Again, it shows the area of Coal Pit Close, and there are a number of dark grey circular features which are almost certainly bell pits or shallow shaft coal mines. This is a LiDAR scan of Coal Pit Close. In LiDAR, a laser mounted on an aircraft interrogates the ground, a computer receives the return signals and processes the result into an image which appears like an aerial photograph with the trees removed. Tony Woods was very expert in doing further interpretation to show small differences in the height of features. Once again, we can see the bell pits at the end of Northcliffe Park, and you may also be able to make out ploughing lines from even earlier exploitation of the land. This is another LiDAR scan processed at Bradford University Archaeology Department. It rather exaggerates the deep ravine or clough caused by glacial meltwater at the end of the last ice age, but it does show surface features very well. This LiDAR scan shows the workings for coal on the south side of Northcliffe, which we call the boundary pits, and also stone exploitation on the north side. In this slide, first note the position 2. Below is a ravine caused by glacial meltwater. To the right it is part of the Northcliffe wood system, and to the left it is in land owned by the golf course. It is known locally as Dungeon Wood, and I hope you can see that a series of shafts and areas of colliery spoil deposition extend up it. The features in the lower half of the slide are the results of modern golf course construction. The Friends of Northcliffe very generously paid for 2 days of geophysics to be undertaken by a team from the University of Bradford. It turned out that Hannah Brown was a gifted teacher, and she had several willing pupils, among whom Chris showed a special aptitude. Several geophysical techniques were tried. This slide shows the shafts at the end of Northcliffe Park revealed by ground-penetrating radar. This slide shows the same area examined with magnetometry. You can see the shafts and the way in which they have interrupted old ploughing lines. This would indicate that the area was used for agriculture before it was used for coal mining, although it doesn't give a date for either of these procedures. A great deal of time was devoted to ground survey, in which volunteers located and plotted the positions of many features in Northcliffe Wood. The volunteers had some preliminary training in nearby Heaton Woods. This is an iron-containing discharge from a probably 18th century coal mine adit. Here you can see a similar but much smaller discharge of iron-containing ochre water into the Northcliffe Dyke. A fortunate tree fall along the quarry face by the bowling green in Northcliffe Park revealed a deposit of fire clay and coal, possibly the 36-yard coal. I'd like to show you ground photographs taken at 4 sites indicated on this LiDAR scan. Point A is a collection of filled shafts and heaps of spoil, which we call the boundary pits, because they're close to a boundary wall between Northcliffe Woods and the golf course. We have absolutely no idea who was responsible for creating them, but they are in fact in historic Heaton, which extends down as far as the dyke at this point. This is a coal shaft and surrounding colliery spoil among the boundary pits. This is a second shaft in the same group. Point B is the position of Joseph Wright's open tail or drift mine. I have to admit the appearances in the photograph are not terribly convincing, but I hope you'll take my word for it. I don't think there's much doubt about this feature, which is a huge heap of colliery waste adjacent to Northcliffe Dyke. C2 is a similar feature a little further up the dyke. The yellow colour material is the natural glacial drift in this area. Above it is piled a huge amount of fire clay debris. Point D is one of a number of shallow excavations from which stone has been removed in the past. We have absolutely no idea who undertook this work, and the fact that our historian Tony Woods could not find any leasing documents or other paper records may indicate that it was operated by the landowner himself. The construction of dry stone walls locally would have been a huge stimulus to stone excavation and processing. Tony produced this map, which shows the sites we located, plotted over Dungeon Wood and the adjacent fields. Note that where High Bank Plantation is recorded, there was once the entrance to a coal mine whose galleries, exploiting the soft bed, stretched as far as Long Lane. Note the presence of recorded old coal pits and Bunkers Hill, which is now planned as a possible site for the crematorium. As part of the Heritage Project, we undertook 2 small excavations. This slide shows us working in a small quarry that's on the north edge of Northcliffe Wood. This is the quarry excavation again, showing heaps of discarded stone. We believe that the scratches on this piece of stone were produced when the stone above it was levered off. A group of volunteers stripped turf off a site in Northcliffe Park prior to excavation. We were surprised by the shallowness of the soil. The yellow colour which you can see is the glacial till. The diagram shows our main trench relating to a surface feature 43, which we believe to be a filled shaft. S1, S2 and S3 are deep explorations within this area of a type known as a sondage. One of the sondages has reached nearly 1/4 of a metre in depth. These are some of the finds we recovered at excavation. The large rock is a septuarian nodule, a concretion often found in sedimentary rocks and probably indicating that it came from a coal mine. The object at the top left is a piece of firebrick. We know that firebricks were not made in this area until the middle of the 19th century, and that therefore these finds probably indicate the dates at which the shafts were filled rather than the date at which they were created. This slide shows a selection of finds: ceramics, flat glass, clay pipe fragments and beads. There is nothing here which couldn't have a Victorian date. I hope that I have given a reasonably clear account of the evidence we used in the project. We've now reached the final few slides. What, you may reasonably ask, are our conclusions from all this effort? We believe that in the 17th century Northcliffe had a fairly small population living in small farms. There were some enclosed fields, and indeed their enclosure may have gone back to Tudor times. There were large areas of woodland and undeveloped moorland. Rights on common land would have been vested in the Lord of the Manor of Shipley. Any coal extraction would have been through shallow shaft bell pits. These would be 20 metres deep at most and probably a lot less deep. We imagine they were attempting to exploit the 36-yard coal, which was close to the surface. Once the Leeds and Liverpool Canal had opened, there might have been exports of coal. This certainly occurred in nearby Heaton. The enclosure acts towards the end of the 18th century must have stimulated surface stone exploitation for dry stone wall construction, and there is a good deal of physical evidence for this. By the middle of the 19th century, there would have been deeper shaft collieries accessing the hard and soft bed seams. These would have been operated as pillar and stool mines and would have given perhaps up to 70% of extraction. Soft drainage into the beck would have been usual, and large spoil heaps were created. The Reverend Cyril Jackson was a well-known lord of the manor of Shipley, but an absentee landlord. There were many disputes with the Field family of Heaton over who owned what coal and where, since boundaries between the two areas were not entirely clear. In 1819, John Wilmer Field purchased the lordship of the manor of Shipley, and there were no further arguments. His daughter inherited his holdings in Heaton and Shipley, and by marriage these were transmitted to the Earls of Ross. After the mid-19th century, there seems to have been quite extensive quarrying of Stanningley rock, coal and fireclay, although written evidence is not as plentiful as we would wish. Towards the end of the century, the development of amenity woodlands and the construction of villas seems a more profitable way of using land, and any remaining coal shafts would have been filled at that time. In the period of 1911 to 1912, the Ross estate was sold, and Sir Norman Ray made his historic purchase, from which we all benefit today. I hope you have enjoyed this presentation. It is dedicated to the memory of John McIlwain, archaeologist, and Tony Woods, historian, who both died during the project.